Dumelang. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 24 of the IAB Insights series. I am your host, Tshegofatso Phetlhe from the IAB Youth Council, and I'm so glad to be connecting with you all today as we unlock the digital publisher opportunity. This episode is brought to you by our ever awesome partners, Gumtree, Everlytic, and Biz Community. Huge thanks for going on this journey with us, and to all those tuning in from home, prepare to take notes as usual, and as we share like in the insights and converse over takeaways that will actually help you in making work that connects. Today's panelists hail from the publisher side of our community, from Carola York, VP of Jellyfish Riaan Wolmarans, who is no stranger to the Insight series from Arena Holdings, and David Steinacker, Head of Sub-Saharan Africa Online Partnerships at Google, and another fellow of the series, JD Engelbrecht, MD at Everlytic. So great to have you all. But before I actually get into the episode today, there are some house rules. There will be some polls that will pop up throughout the session, so don't be alarmed when you see one. It's simply a way of interacting with y'all from afar in this time of not seeing your beautiful faces. And the Q&A option is down here below, so do jump in with your questions after every single session, and they will be addressed at the end after our last speaker. Engage with us on Twitter at IAB SA, and a feedback survey will also be shared at the end of the show, just to gauge y'all's interest on the webinar so that you say whether you like me or you don't. So I'll get into it. For our keynote speakers, we peep into a conversation between Carola York and Riaan Wolmarans, who discuss digital transformation through the right data foundations. First up is Carola York. She is Vice President of Publishing from Jellyfish. Having worked at Jellyfish for 9 years, she has specialized in supporting publishers with their digital marketing and digital transformation, with a particular focus on data and audience development and reader revenues. Based in the UK, but with a global remit to support Jellyfish's publisher clients worldwide, Carola has spent 25 years client-side in senior marketing roles in the UK, Hong Kong, Singapore, for a myriad of newspaper and magazine publishers, including The Economist. She will be in conversation with Riaan Wolmarans, who is Head of Digital Media at Arena Holdings, and he's an experienced editor and manager with plenty of skills in the digital publishing and website management, as well as print editing and production on publications such as Business Day, Mail and Guardian, and the Financial Times. Thank you both for joining us, Riaan and Carola.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
The stage is yours.
Well, thank you very much for that very, very welcome introduction to both of us. What we're going to be talking about in this session is how Jellyfish has supported Arena Holdings' efforts to harness the power of their news platforms and how they place data at the centre of their digital business strategy. So maybe we're going to start right at the beginning of this journey, the digital journey, which I think Arena started over 5 years ago, back in 2015, which was actually before Jellyfish started working with them. So I'm going to pass over to Riaan to start with, just to outline some of the key projects that the business was working on back then and why they were a focus. So over to Riaan.
Thank you, Carola. That's correct. So, in 2015, back then we were still known as Times Media. We've had a couple of name changes since then. It became TISO Blackstar and then Arena Holdings. And for those of you who might not know, we are the publisher of some of the very big print and digital titles in South Africa, including the Sunday Times, Business Day, Financial Mail, Vrye Weekblad Online, Times Live, Sowetan Live, Business Live. Those are all of some of our big websites. So we are a very big publisher in both print and digital. In 2015, we were essentially at a point where we had some very old websites, no paywalls to speak of in place, anything like that. But we knew that we wanted to embark on a digital reader revenue strategy to make sure that we have a business that is sustainable into the future. To do that, we had to do the groundwork first. The foundation had to be built. So in other words, we first had to rebuild all of our websites from scratch to kind of update them and conform with all kinds of best practice and the latest technology in terms of a news website that you would like to have on there. So we did that. Also, the other important aspect of that foundation is the content that goes onto the websites. So certainly we put a lot of effort into focusing on changing how our newsrooms work, to really institute some digital first news flows across the board in all of our newsrooms to make sure that we always have a feed of fast but reliable, high quality news to our websites. once we had that in place, it became easier to say, well, the next step is to put our paywalls in place, to say we've now offered our readers something that's worth paying for, in terms of the quality and the appeal of the content for that matter. So that was then the next step, is to start adding paywalls to our websites. And that has been quite successful for us. But of course, then what happened along all this, along this route, is that we started gathering more and more data about our websites, about our readers, people registering on our sites, people subscribing, their behavior on our websites, what content they consume. I mean, there's a host of data elements that you start gathering, and you end up with this giant pool of data that essentially you have to use to guide your business strategy in terms of a paywall, for example. So this is the challenge we faced. Like, we had all the building blocks in place. We started on our journey towards being, a publisher with successful paywalls. But where to start using all that data, that was the difficult thing we faced.
And when obviously you realised that data was that big priority, what were you actually then trying to look to achieve? What were your key goals from that?
Well, it's as I said, I mean, we knew we had a strategy in terms of reader revenue being our main source of income from our websites, advertising revenue always being important, of course, but we wanted to really drive the subscription revenue. We chose across our sites essentially the freemium model of a paywall, which means that though there's plenty of content that's reserved for subscribers only, there's also lots of free content. So, we do that to maintain that balance of attracting enough traffic to our websites to make them, an attractive option for advertisers, of course, since we have a high volume of content, but also it's enough of a big audience that we can essentially funnel them into becoming a registered user, or even better, a paying subscriber, of course. So it's about studying that user journey and kind of making that work for us, and seeing how do we need to tweak that to get to our business goals. And for that, that's where your data comes in. So, we started slowly. I mean, it's you can't just go ahead and appoint a 20-person strong data team, of course. And there's a lot of skill involved with once you start looking into data management, data analytics, when you're running a website. So we knew to support that kind of decision making of this endeavor of ours, whether it's on management level, where our CEO and the MD expect us to know certain things from our data every single day, or whether it's on editorial level, where we want our news editors and other newsroom staff able to make decisions based on the data they get from our websites. All of that is what we faced, that we had to do, to make sure that we give people easy access to that data, first of all, for example, via data dashboards, so they don't have to go into the inside bits of Google Analytics. They can get an easy to understand dashboard that's quick for them to access. It explains in plain English what they're seeing on the screen, and they can use their data to make their decisions. So those are the elements that we then started to look at.
And obviously, I'm well aware that you've actually already got some internal data resources, and you could have done this potentially yourselves. What made you then reach out to us, to Jellyfish, to support with your projects?
Well, yes, I mean, I mentioned the idea of a 20-person strong data team before, because, we've obviously visited some of the big international papers that are further down the road with these kind of ventures than we are. I mean, the likes of Financial Times and so forth. And I mean, they've had the luxury of over the years building a bigger data team. I mean, some of their internal data teams are really impressive to behold. They have incredible expertise on board. But again, I mean, we can't, just looking at resources, plus also just mapping our journey. We can't just, we didn't want to go just into the market and say we're appointing 10 people and that's the data team. We wanted to kind of evolve into a data team that's fit for purpose for us. So essentially we started with no official data team even 3 years ago, with that work essentially being done by other people in the digital teams. And then starting to build our own expertise. And now we have essentially an internal team of 4 people, including a head of data, who are focusing full-time on that. But even that is not really enough for an organization or a publisher the size of us. I mean, we have a good 10, 11 million readers per month across our websites in South Africa. So hence, you know, when we started talking to Jellyfish, this was a very good turn of events for us, because Jellyfish came with specific expertise in the areas of data analytics, data analysis and management that we were already looking at. So also that came about also because we invested in Google Analytics 360. Obviously we were using free Google Analytics, and we decided to upgrade to the full suite in that sense. And that's also where Jellyfish came in to enable that. So and since then, I mean, that's how the partnership started. And since then, I think it's been very useful for us, because our own data team has benefited from the extra pairs of hands from Jellyfish. We've learned a lot from the people at Jellyfish in terms of transfer of skills, of course. And some of the data kind of setups and implementation and projects we've tried to do have gone a lot faster because of the extra help we've had.
Okay, well, maybe sort of I'll do a little bit of talking now, which is just talk about actually what we did. Obviously, once Arena appointed Jellyfish to take over some of the project work that they needed some help with. So the first stage of the project was really just making sure that all the correct data foundations were in place. And I think that's really important to start off any journey. And that allowed us to scale all the other work that we've done in the since then off the back of that. So as Riaan said, obviously they decided to move across to Google Analytics 360. So the first step was to actually move all of their properties, and we supported moving all of those into that single GA360 account. Once that was done, we then established all the best practice blueprints to ensure that all the key data points, user attributes, behaviors, the content engagement data that's really important for any publisher, that they were all collected in a very standardized way across all of the different properties that Arena has got. And once that was done, we then enriched the data, added some custom tracking activity that they wanted that was all bespoke to Arena's needs. And all of that was then pulled together. And the foundations of that then allowed us to integrate and with Google Ad Manager, as well as with BigQuery. So it was really sort of getting all those foundations ready in the first place. And that was the first stage of the project. So maybe I'm going to just pass across to Riaan, saying what did you do with that? Once we'd done that for you, what did you then take on, and what did you learn from that internally?
Well, I mean, there were two immediate benefits. One was essentially for us on the back end of the operation. Those of us who are comfortable with diving straight into Google Analytics, for example, to look for the data we need for certain reasons. So clearly, I mean, it was better organized, better access to data, a better quality set of data all around. And then into the business, as I mentioned, we built a series of dashboards, depending on the job role involved, to give people access to this kind of data in one view, and as I said, in plain English, because that's very, very important for us. You know, you have to understand that most people working in your editorial team, for that matter, do not understand maybe what a unique browser is, or a page view, or what does that really mean for me, or time on page. So you have to make sure people are comfortable with what you're showing to them, and you explain it to them well, so that they can actually start using it in their jobs meaningfully. And then, so I mean, that was one of the very visible things we did with this, which has been great. And then, of course, you know, I mean, we've moved into the higher grade kind of side of this data, whereby we are tracking much closer than ever before the subscriber behavior on our websites, and using that to fine tune how we actually manage our paywalls.
Okay, I will sort of go into a little bit of nitty gritty now in terms of some of the data that went behind some of those dashboards and what we have done to support Arena with that. So one of the things you're going to hear about after our session is about Google's News Consumer Insights framework. And we use that structure for the foundation of some Data Studio dashboards for Arena. NCI splits the audiences down into casual readers, loyal readers, and brand lovers. And we also then added in the registered users, the logged in users, as well as the paid subscribers. So there were sort of 5 key segments in total that we were displaying in the dashboards. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we linked up Google Ad Manager with Google Analytics 360. And that's really powerful when the two tools get pulled together, because it allows advertising revenue data to be brought into the dashboard. And it allows, you can then break that down by those 5 segments I mentioned. And you can obviously also put that alongside the other more general data that you have, such as traffic sources, the engagement metrics, user profiles, device types, locations, all the data that's available within GA. And the key reason for pulling those two together was that within Google Ad Manager, you can't actually see or correlate advertising revenue back to an individual content page. And obviously for publishers, that's really important for them to understand exactly how content is what's it generating in terms of revenues for you. And when we pull those two together, you've got those insights, and obviously that was a great piece of insight. And as Riaan was talking about, allowing editors to actually see what the value of their content has been. So that was the core foundation for the dashboards. But then obviously with Arena having multiple properties, we obviously created different dashboards for each of those individual properties, but then we rolled them up. So there was a central top level one, which was then used by more sort of senior management to have a look at how it sits across all of those properties. Allows you to make, you can compare and contrast what is looking at in total across the business, as well as for the individual properties. And obviously now it's being created, it's live, it's updating constantly. There's historic data in there so you can look back on stuff, and there's also current data that can be viewed. So I might maybe just sort of pass on to Riaan, just to, I've gone through the nitty gritty, maybe just talk about actually what you've done with that, what you've learned from that data and how it's been utilized internally.
Yeah, it's great. In short, I mean, as I said, I mean, there are many applications, even from the part of editorial, being able to see whether certain stories actually led to new subscriptions, you know, coming onto our books, and knowing whether how that content performs, not just in terms of popularity, but in terms of actually making us money. And of course, we've moved on to, as I said, the more exciting part of this kind of project, you know, looking ahead to what we can now do with our data. And one of those things is, you know, looking at, for example, at a subscription propensity modeling, whereby we use all of this data to predict whether a reader is likely to subscribe, so we can then intervene and make sure that person gets offered a deal, whether through marketing or otherwise.
I'll go into a little bit of detail because some people might not understand what a propensity model is. The core aim of one is you define the value of all the website visitors that you've got on your site, and then you then divide them up into groups based on different attributes that indicate what propensity they've got to convert. So by doing this, and the reason for doing this is obviously you can send customized messages to particular groups depending on what their propensity is. So for example, you've got a group of people who've got a very high propensity to convert, you've indicated those, you can send them an upfront full price subscription offer. There's no point in doing a low price one. But then you've got people who are lower down the propensity. It might be better to prompt for a registration first. They're not necessarily ready to convert, but you've got to start them on that journey. So maybe give them a registration, give them a bit of taster of some of the premium content that you've got to offer, what you've got behind the paywall, to give them an example of what they've got. So you're sort of gently easing them into that journey towards subscribing. And it's very much machine learning at its best, but it does need a data specialist, data scientist specialist to do this. It's not something that is easy necessarily to be done. You've got to make sure you've got the right quality people to do that. So obviously that work has now been done for Arena. So maybe Riaan, I think you're in the process of now actually testing this and seeing what you can get from it. So maybe talk us a little bit through that.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, this is very exciting for us. We've already started identifying these audience segments for in terms of propensity to subscribe, and we are now rolling out various ways of testing our assumptions about this data. Because I mean, data management and analytics is always a process that you have to test, improve as you go along. So that's where we are with that. But that also leads us to another something exciting we're doing. I mean, it's really about, as we've created segments of people likely to subscribe, I mean, we can create other very valuable audience segments also. So that's another thing we're looking at quite closely now, is to see how do you identify certain very high value audience segments in our massive data pool that we can offer to an advertiser to say, here is a very specifically targeted audience segment that, you know, is really something that you would be interested in because it so closely aligns with your business needs. And potentially that's something we can charge more money for. So it works for us on that level too.
Yeah, that's the project that's sort of currently being worked on, is just about to be started, and it's going to be very interesting to see what the outcome is of that. And machine learning opens up all sorts of different opportunities, and it's something that we're building on, as we said. So I think we're now running out of time. So maybe I will just pass across to Riaan to sort of sum up why data has been really fundamental to Arena, and sort of what you want to be doing next.
Well, I think it's really as simple. I mean, I can say it in one sentence: you can't have a digital business strategy if you don't base it on the data. It's as simple as that. Anything you do, you must go to the data first, and that's what guides your decisions.
Lovely. I think we're now going to hand back to our chair.
Thank you so much, Riaan and Carola. It's quite an undertaking that you guys even explained. So I appreciate you letting us be the wallflower to how you actually built that relationship and then delivered the value to Arena's current activities and future ones too. What actually peaked for me is a poll that you'll actually see on your screens. And I think it would be interesting for our audience to also engage on this. And the question reads as, do you feel the industry is well equipped with the knowledge to harness the power of data in media? First answer is yes, B is no. Do you think we need more work, which is C, or do you think we need more partners? Do vote on which one you think is best, because obviously from these conversations, we start learning that maybe it is a case of getting more partners like Jellyfish into, the boardroom, especially when we're developing these strategies. So we'll let that tinker so I can see your results. Needs more work. Okay, so Carola, I think we have our job cut out for ourselves here. Thank you, guys. Cool. Our second speaker for today is David Steinaker, who is head of online partnerships group in the sub-Saharan market for Google. His focus is on the business development of online advertising and monetization strategy. He consults sustainable business models and yields optimizing monetization strategies in the online industry. With a strong background and passion in the ICT and mobile sector in emerging markets, he will be sharing some insights on the potential of data strategies in publishing and sharing a live demo on the Google News Consumer Insights tool. David, welcome.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me today and for everybody for attending and taking some time out of your very busy schedule today. So my name is David Steinaker. I am head of SSA for our publishing business as part of the Online Partnerships Group. Very excited to be speaking, obviously, after Riaan and Carola and the very exciting project and endeavor they have embarked on the last few months. Fortunately, we were part of that process as well over time, and we're able to kind of guide and assist in some of the efforts. And Carola has mentioned already that one of the fundamentals of their work and of their approach really to data in the digital world has been some of our frameworks and initiatives. And one of them that I want to go a little bit into today. I would be curious before I start if we can put up the poll or a question maybe in the chat around actually how many people have come across our News Consumer Insights report. So that's the NCI. I will explain a little bit now in the next 5 minutes what it is, but just maybe beforehand, if I can get a sense maybe of how many people actually have heard of this report or maybe even used this, that would be great. And I'll just pull up my screen now in a second as well. There we go. Perfect. So I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes, indeed, David. The poll,
Perfect.
People can submit their responses to us in the chat. If you guys don't mind, would be great.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And let me know when the results are out. Not that it will change anything I would say, but it would be interesting regardless. So I'll just get started. So as part of our Google News Initiative efforts that we've started a couple of years ago, where we're trying to really work closely with news organizations around the world and ultimately share kind of the best practices we are seeing across the globe, really. At the end of the day, we have a lot of insights, we have a lot of access to data, and we're trying our best to kind of make our products as seamlessly and as easily usable for our news partners really around the world. And one of the big efforts is around our News Consumer Insights report. You'll see the demo dashboard in front of you, hopefully right now. It is directly linked to your analytics account. And at the end of the day, it's exactly designed. And obviously, that's why I'm also so glad to hear kind of the success that Arena has been having with this. It's exactly designed for that kind of digital transformation that Riaan was talking about, right? To help publishers basically make data-driven business and editorial decisions. While, of course, this dashboard in the report... Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. We're seeing the wrong screen on your side. We're seeing ourselves on your screen.
All right.
Thank you. Share.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for that. You see that the problem, somebody from Google trying to use Zoom, I have to apologize. Anyway, what about this one now? I hope this is the
much
correct tab.
better. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Thanks for the hint. Awesome. So as I was saying, so the NCI report is aiming at exactly what you've been hearing now from Marina and Jellyfish, to help publishers make data-driven business and editorial decisions. While of course no report can really give you all the answers, this is as Carola said, kind of supposed to give you a framework or to think about and how to approach data-driven decisions in your business, how to start thinking of the data, because one of the big questions we often get, especially from middle or small publishing houses or publishers in South Africa, is kind of, where do I start? How do I start? I have this data. Yes, I use Google Analytics maybe, but I don't even know how to approach the data. And this is exactly where this report is starting. So you'll see here, and by the way, so again, we will be sharing this link with you afterwards. You can link up with your analytics account at the top here. So once you authenticate and link up with your account, you should be getting your own data in this dashboard immediately. Now, this is dummy data, as I just said. This is obviously a trial account, but what you can see is exactly what you heard earlier. We're starting to break down basically the users into 3 buckets. Again, you've heard this before, into what we call casual readers, loyal readers, and brand lovers. Now, the definitions are here as well. They're very simple definitions, very straightforward. You can actually recreate these buckets in your accounts. Again, exactly what happened in the collaboration you just heard about. And then basically we'll break down to you kind of the information here. How many, for example, casual readers do you have? What's the engagement on your site? Potentially, of course, also what's the ad revenue, etc. And then what's really exciting, so that obviously I'm sure will help you at least visualize and make sense of some of the data you already have in your account. But I think what's really then helpful to you as well is we basically take some of the best practices we see around the world from the biggest news publishing houses and kind of analyze your site based on those. So things like, for example, newsletter acquisitions, web push notifications. Do you have a good social strategy in place in terms of your social presence within your site, social buttons, etc.? What about your load time? How good is your recirculation strategy, right? So recommended content, recommended articles. And you will, again, this is dummy right now, but you will basically be getting these recommendations and ratings for your own site. And we'll tell you, okay, we believe the areas for you to improve on are these 3 out of all the best practices we normally run your site on. And you can see here a lot more. I can't go through all of them now, but I think you get the idea of it. We also have ways to integrate things like scroll depth in your site. Again, very important from an engagement perspective. Newsletter sign up. You heard it before. Carola was saying the 2 buckets they added was, I believe, around registered users and then paying users or paywall subscriptions. Again, all trackable here as well for you to get an initial sense, around what the engagement is really and where obviously the areas for improvement could be. Even ad blocker detection, etc. So there's some really, really, I think, interesting insights you might get from there. Just one more as well here. Again, we'll also break down the buckets already on a higher level for you in terms of demographics. Again, this can be very relevant. In some cases, you might say, hey, I know all about this, that's fine, doesn't really, there's nothing new in it for me. But I think then, for example, looking at things like, okay, we all know newsletters are kind of important, but I think putting some numbers to it and actually understanding how valuable, for example, driving only a few percentage points of your traffic can be to your overall business sometimes helps actually land the message even internally. We all know sometimes it's all about also getting the right people on board, talking about the challenges maybe in the beginning 5 years ago with Arena as well to kind of, get that right buy-in until you actually see results. So sometimes equipping you also with information and data to kind of communicate internally that this is important. That Riaan was very clearly saying at the end now, you cannot run a digital business without basing all of your decisions on data. Not everybody in the market necessarily and in every organization is completely on board with this yet, right? So this is, I think, is also another great way for you to have that kind of data at hand without having to spend too much time yourself on it. So this is really what the majority of the dashboard is really about. Again, we have reader revenue. We have some video insights. If you have video content as well, again, you can see kind of consumption behavior, drop off of video. Again, this could be quite important as well to understand whether there are technical issues or is it content editorial issues, etc. The last thing I'm going to really say before wrapping up, because and I'm happy to obviously take maybe questions later, but just in the interest of time, what is really important here is also, like, if you whatever goal you really have in your organization, whether it's, for example, subscription, whether it's advertising revenue, or whatever else it really might be, or just driving engagement, we all, I think, agree that you have to know where to start. You can't start everywhere. You can't be advertising, for example, your subscription to every single user. So that would obviously be a waste of money, potentially, digital space, and time as well. So one thing that this report, I think, is brilliant that I've seen really, I think, help immediately narrow the focus for almost all partners that certainly I and my team works with, is getting a better sense, for example, where the opportunities lie, where the engagement in terms of page views are, right? Looking at, okay, the majority of users, have only a fraction of our page views, for example. So where do I really start? So as a very simple last example and practical example, if you see something, around loyal and brand lovers, right? There's usually not much you can do about casual readers, or at least it takes much more effort. So for example, the biggest starting point is recreating these buckets in your own accounts, and then digging deeper into the brand lovers, which are basically users that come to your site at least every other day or more per month, right? And understanding, so if they visit me pretty much 33 times a month, meaning every day at least, right? But they're consuming only 2 pages per visit, but then again spend 14 minutes on my site, as an example. What does this really mean? And how come there's a difference of 14 minutes to only 2.5 minutes? Once you can identify that, right? And understanding that these users, the brand lovers, only make up how much? 1% of your readers, but are giving you 20% of your page views. You only need to transfer, basically, or transform rather, a fraction of the loyal readers into brand lovers, and you have a huge impact on your business, right? You only need to move 1 or 2 percentage points, which would be doubling your brand lovers, and you would have a significant impact on your business. That's a completely different mindset to saying, I'm only targeting 1% of my readers right now, actually, right? But I could have a significant impact on my business, versus what a lot of businesses, of course, do is more the kind of blanketed approach to all the users and run campaigns, etc. So I think that's really where this report can be of a great help, starting to narrow down your focus and understanding where you really have most work to do. But as I said, in the interest of time, I will leave it here. I've probably been gone over already. But again, thanks very much for making the time today. And again, I'll be available later, and we'll be discussing a couple of questions. So feel free, of course, to ask anything. But again, thanks for your time today. And I'll hand over now.
Thank you so much, David. Do stay on camera though, because I think it's interesting, the question that you posed to us, and we have actually created the poll now, and it will be popping up on your screens. I do appreciate everyone who answered it within the chat, but yes, how many have come across the Google Consumer Insights tool? Do let us know, because it will be interesting to also know how many people have considered all the tools that are out there already, and not having, gone the partnership route with an entire other company. So let's see what the crowd says. 47% tell us no, and 37% say tell me more. So it'll be very interesting for us, I think, as we even go along. Just from this demo alone, I think most of us will start clicking through probably as we're watching the webinar. So thank you so much for that, David. Cool. And for our final speaker, we have JD Engelbert, and he will actually be speaking on unlocking data's value. And I think for this one, we'll launch a poll just before I even go into his bio. And for this one, I want to ask the crowd, how best do you think unlocking data's value could be managed? Could it be automated by machine learning, or be manual by people, like more people driven, or can it be a combination of both, considering even what David just took us through? It is 3 answers, but I know that people will think and meditate over it. Combination of both. Okay. JD is going to take us through it, and let me start singing his praises. So JD will be chatting to us about improving conversions and boosting returns with data-driven automation. JD is a commercial technologist with material expertise and experience in the context of digital product development, commercialization, and distribution. His core competencies include product development, advanced data analytics and data science, as well as marketing technologies, ecosystems, and strategic distribution via business development development, and alliances. He has a track record of designing fit-for-purpose strategies, resourcing programs for execution, and successfully implementing within complex environments. JD, thank you for joining us.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you. And yeah, welcome to everyone to the clickbait portion of today's session, where we're going to talk about improving conversions and boosting returns with data-driven automation. I think I hit a number of buzzwords there, so let's just get stuck into it. I am lost, so I have to make up a little bit of time, so I'm going to jump through it quite quickly. So let me just get there. So just a little bit of context. I would say that I spent my formative years in media, stuck in the tech and the data and the commercials around it. So I have some battle scars, and I know the context that you guys operate in. So with that in mind, let's look at the publisher engagement wish list. Essentially, you want to introduce your platform. You want to sell the value proposition that you have. You want to recycle users between your properties to cross-pollinate. You want to onboard new people into your ecosystem to be able to grow all the time. You want people to consume your content across multiple devices, create that habit, and promote the different features and content pillars of your platform. So these last three ones I mentioned are all high predictors of conversion, and it makes intuitive sense, right? People who consume across multiple devices means that they're consuming your content probably in different places and across multiple day parts. And then people who habitually consume your content and then have consume a broader subset of the content and the features, they're getting more value and likely will pay you for the service. Then when people are starting to disengage, you want to get them back on the boat. You want to convert users to the tasks that you set for them. This may be registering for a newsletter. We saw now from David's presentation there that email and web push notifications, both things that Evelytic provides, just saying, there's my only plug for today. It's very important to get people back to your platform and doing the things you want. But converting users may also be to get them to sign up for a service, even if it is just consuming the next page to display an advertisement to them. Then the ones you have, you want to retain. The ones you have, you want to keep happy. If they're not happy, you want to implement some remedial action for them. And those who are happy, you want to turn into brand ambassadors, because it is interesting that people respond better to being given the gift to give than getting something for free. So to achieve this in this context, you need to have everyone pulling in the same direction. You need to create a branching logic, a tapestry, and I'll show you a diagram of what I mean with advanced journey planning and automation in a bit. You want to execute across multiple channels, and I'm talking whilst from my context at Evelytic, we send 6 billion emails a year. We're an email business, but this includes all database marketing channels, which we also provide. So it's email, SMS, push notifications on the app, web push notifications, automated voice, and ultimately also your call centers that you have invested in over the years. They also are a great converter at the end of it. Then personalization and segmentation is a must, and it's also super simple to do. It's barely an inconvenience. And then you want to create a comprehensive, easy access to the data for people and systems. It is my opinion that integrating at a data layer is far superior to integrating at a systems level. It's just going to make you more agile, and it creates an agnostic platform to change, swap out vendors, try new things, new platforms, and so forth. I'm going to touch very basically and very briefly on a couple of data foundations, starting with the data value chain. I am a very large and solid proponent of having a single executive that controls the entire data value chain, someone with enough expertise, but also broad and deep enough, strong enough mandate to own all of these, let's call it the slices of the pie, because otherwise you're going to make a complicated thing excessively painful if you have to ask permission and try and coordinate internally. So everything starts with the collection, and things don't end wrong, they usually start wrong. So in the collection phase, you're going to tag, you're going to track, you're going to create the data pipelines and assign the metadata to the pages to allow you to go on to feed data into the augmentation layer, where you're going to combine it, you're going to analyze it, do some segmentation and do some predictive modeling, and I'll touch on that in the next slide. Then once it's augmented, you need to activate and provision it for different systems, integrate them all together so that your data is provisioned into your advertising and your database marketing stacks. And then it ends up, it flows into execution, which is an important bit. This can be either manual or automatically done, different channels. And this is also where the conversion optimization comes into play. It shows incredible yield if done correctly. And then it's not done until feedback is put back in the system to create a self-optimizing, self-enriching ecosystem. This is event-level data that comes back in, and including attribution. And in the media context, attribution is a finicky game. My opinion is that last touch attribution is a fool's errand. You have to look at the assisted conversions that the content has, that the newsletters have, because someone doesn't just wake up one morning and decide, like, I'm going to subscribe to a new service. You show them the value. It's a consistent proving of the value case, and then ultimately you put the marketing stimuli, the call to action in front of them. And that concludes the data value chain at a high level. Then I'm just also going to touch on a couple of data types. And I think the key takeaway on the first two buckets is that you can get a hell of a long way with very simple data in terms of getting it. Transactional data is very structured. Transactional data is typically the outflow of commercial engagement with your platform. So what do they buy? Where are they buying? Which calls to action are they clicking on? What's the customer lifetime value in that? Then you have the descriptive data, which is typically the things that you could tell if you would look at someone, gender. This will take you a long way. Then the most fun bucket, which I've enjoyed my life the most, is the inferred data space, where you take the things that you know and you make inferences about them. You put them into probability models. Conversion probability, as Carola mentioned, is something that you have to have a certain skill set for. But if you have clean data and you have people who understand the context of the data, then these aren't actually, it's much more achievable than you think. Engagement scoring is also simple. You look at the recency, the frequency, and the volume of engagement, and that'll give you an aggregate compounded evaluation of whether someone is in or out. Content preferences, recommendations, self-explanatory. Clustering along certain variables will give you homogeneous groups to market to. And then churn predictions also intuitively, when people stop using your platform, you know that they're likely to unsubscribe, and you can add some remedial action to that. And then the final bucket for today is the contextual data. So I would refer to this as commentary on the relationship. So where is someone in the conversion funnel? What are their communication needs? Where did they get stuck? What are they viewing? How are they viewing? And so forth. Right. So I promised Paula that I wouldn't swear on her live broadcast. So I would say that data without execution is silly, dumb, stupid, and expensive, but let's settle on less than ideal. It's just busy work, expensive busy work if you're not doing anything with it. So let's talk about unlocking value through automation. And what I would say here is that it's not exclusively the golden arrow. It's used in conjunction with your bulk communication strategies, your newsletter strategies, and all of that. But let's get stuck into why people automate. And I see I'm running out of time, so I'll speed up. We have trained the subscribers and people to expect personal communication. We want to nurture relationships, and that can only happen at scale through automation. We have limited resources that we need to work with. Making money is at the top of all of our lists. You want to follow different channels, meet the people where they are at, and do it in a scalable way, which means that you need a tech to do the heavy lifting, and measurability is a key component of automation. Personalization is not just changing a name, it is contextually creating unique experiences for everyone. Changing each message based on dynamic content sections from the data, and then having a one-on-one relationship as people navigate the the tapestry of your marketing automation programs. So this is my last slide, I promise, I'm nearly done, is I just want to take you through the structure of an automation program on a multi-channel marketing hub like Everlytic. So first of all, you need to understand what you want, and people skip over this too easily. These are your goals. Then you need to understand the drivers of the ultimate activity, and these are your objectives. So if done, what would drive the positive outcomes in terms of my goals? And then you have sales and different conversations aligned with every objective. Those are your journeys, and inside that, you have different key points that you want to land, different value propositions. These are your messages, and every message will have personalization, and these personalization elements are driven off of a data foundation. And from this, it'll change the content dynamically in the messages, but it'll also assist with the transitions between messages. So let's say the journey one was you want to expose people to your value proposition, and you have a sequence that's deferred by days. So it's every second day, send a new message. Then once this is done, put them on a conversion journey. You start at full price based on, you can have dynamic pricing because you know the probability of converting. So you can pitch the dynamic pricing that you can feed through the links back into your platform to execute on. But if someone converts, you don't want them on this rest of the journey. You want to push them to a retention journey. And you can see how they are circulated, and it creates this rich tapestry of touch points that creates unique one-on-one relationships based on the context, the pacing, and the requirements of the consumer. And then you have the ecosystem integrations, as Carola mentioned with Riaan, is you want to have this data flow back into your data warehouse that pushes into your ad stack. You want to have a proper link hygiene with your UTM tracking to pass through context into your ad stack as well. And I can go on for days, but I'll stop by saying that better communication that meets your subscribers automatically, personally, and on the preferred channels is better business. And with that, I'm done.
Thank you so much, JD. I really appreciate all of those insights. And don't worry, I think people caught it even though you were going through all of the slides as fast as you could. Can I please invite all of our speakers to turn on their cameras as we now go into our Q&A section. And so everyone, you do remember that our Q&A is down below. I won't point which side because it always mirrors it and then I'm using the wrong hand. So, okay, awesome. Carola, I will start with you. Thank you for the great detail on how you transformed business with the right data foundations. But for others, where is the right or best place to start?
Okay, I would say there's probably two things to think about. One is the first and key thing, if you're going to do anything with data, is to make sure it's clean, it's accurate. You can't make sense out of your data if you're not collecting it correctly in the first place. So whether you'll get the right tagging in place, whether you're tracking the right things, the things that are important to you, all of that, getting those right foundations are absolutely fundamental. Whether that's something you do internally or you reach out to someone else for some support on that, that underpins everything. And the other thing is obviously what David outlined as well. I think if you use the NCI framework and the tools that they've got, that actually can throw up some opportunities and things you probably didn't even realize were going on. So I would say those are the two, if you're going to start somewhere you haven't started on your data journey, start with those two, gives you a start and a thinking place of where to go next.
Thank you, David, especially because Carola mentioned you. What would be the third for you?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously have to agree with that. I mean, 100% the idea of the NCI was precisely that, to help, especially news organizations, to kind of know where to start and help them with a bit of a framework. But I mean, I think the other thing I would also say is be clear about your goals. I mean, a lot of people kind of, even the ones we talk to, kind of, yes, we want to do something with data, or we know we need to work on X. But I think being very clear of what you're actually trying to achieve and what your end outcome is, I think is something as well very important to keep in mind in the beginning. But yeah, and also, yeah, just get your hands dirty at some point. You will never get that perfect formula. Even the NCI report is not everything you will need to kind of, achieve that transformation. I want to be very clear about it. It's a starting point, and that's what it's intended to be as well. So get your hands dirty. It takes time. Don't have the wrong expectations. We heard it again from Riaan, like overall, it's a 5-year process as a company, at least, right? It doesn't always have to take that long, but don't expect, to see immediate impact after a month or so. These are things that take a lot of time. get it right. But yeah, those maybe might be the key things, like have a clear goal in mind, get your hands dirty, maybe use the NCI if you want to, it's there to be used, and have the right expectations. This will take time.
I think that's a good one to ladder, because I think most people assume that with data it can happen now, but it does take a bit more time. So this one is from Anonymous, and I'm going to direct it to Riaan. Any recommendations to ease existing website users who have become used to free content into paid content? Do we go with a phased approach, free credits, cut off time for a discount, etc.? What do you think?
It's a very important decision you have to take as a publisher when you decide to go the paywall route, because there are many different kinds of paywalls, of course. As you've just briefly mentioned there, I mean, sometimes people use micropayments per article that you pay a few cents to access an article. You can have a solid paywall where everything is locked up and you can't read a single thing for free. You can have our model, which is a mix of free and paid for content, but we're not metered in the sense that you can only read 5 free articles and then you are asked to pay. There's the voluntary membership models. I mean, there's quite a few of those, but ultimately, how do you get someone to pay? That's the $1 million question, very literally, of course. And really, it first of all, it completely comes down to having the right technology in place to make it as easy as possible for them to do so. Your website has to be so accessible, and the user journey, as it is called, has to be so easy that there's no resistance there for them. And then secondly, the content. The content is what makes or breaks everything. If you don't have the right quality content in place, what would they be paying for? And that's the difficult question you have to ask yourself as a publisher when you decide to go the paywall route is, do I have anything that's worth paying for? And you have to answer that question first.
True. And I've often found that if I actually pay for something and then I don't get the value, I never go back. So running that risk is quite a big one, and it's an important decision to make. Thank you for that one. And this one is for JD. What innovative ways have you seen publishers use email?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So there are a few things happening in the world. One of them that touch publishers, and one of them is the cookieless world, where it's just going to be more difficult to identify users. So the interesting thing is that we recently issued our benchmark reports where we analyzed, I think, something around 900 million engagements with content. And a newsletter is very powerful in your strategy to drive every aspect of your strategy, to be honest. But when you click from an email or from a push notification, from these mechanisms, we know who you are, and we can attribute an ID. And we can pass that through to the Google client ID when you hit the publisher's website. And that can help identify anonymous users and give a little bit more insight, both to the advertising platform, so you can sell a more valuable advertising impression, but also more insight as to who this user is and what is it that they need. Because you treating someone like they're a first-time user when they're actually someone who's on the brink of conversion, but you just don't know it because you don't have that context. That's a silly mistake to make if you can help it. And then just to suck up another minute of your time is, I saw someone posted to the panelists a question or a statement around that a data-first approach, in a way, and I'm paraphrasing, smothers the creativity of content and has a detrimental impact on content. And there's many people who have different stances to that. But something that I've seen in the past where at a previous employer was that what we did was to go down to every article level and actually do the attribution of conversions. So similar to how this dashboard that David showed will show you how much what the content is earning in advertising, you can also map back and show someone that your article played this role in converting a subscriber and driving a registration, driving a subscription. So I agree that in some cases, if you just incentivize clicks and views, then you're going to get clickbait content. And that's not necessary. That's not the content. And this is true, and Riaan will know, is that that's not the content that converts a subscriber. They want proper content. So you have to measure the right things. And it's more than possible to do that.
Thank you.
One, if you don't mind, that's a really good point, JD, but if I could just add one additional thought to take this a bit further. I mean, when we talk about data first, it doesn't have to be about more clicks per se. So data first can, for example, also be driven. That's why I talked about, you need to have your end goal in mind. Data first can also be, for example, focused on very high engagement on high quality content, right? So investigative journalism, for example, you have a few very, very good examples in South Africa. So maybe just to be clear, you know, when we say data first, it doesn't just have to be about the clickbaity, the most clicks, the most views necessarily, right? You can have other metrics in mind, but still, you know, if you run anything digitally, whether it's investigative journalism, you know, very heavy content, very, very high quality, of course, or maybe you go for the scale, big clicks. I think regardless of the two, you still need that data first, but what you're trying to achieve with the data analysis, I think, is what can differ. So it kind of, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think you need it for both, and you still rely on the data, I believe, to know, for example, those 14 minutes. I mean, again, an investigative journalist would like somebody to read their content on average 14 minutes. It's almost impossible nowadays, but that's something I think somebody who's very keen on their content would like to see. But for you to drive that, you'd still need that data to find out what way to take.
Maggie actually in our comment section, she actually agrees, and she says like Netflix and Spotify are two content platforms that are data first and their creativity isn't compromised. So I think those are really strong examples of how other brands can also take hold of this opportunity.
Yeah.
And this leads us to another question. I think we have a lot of anonymous people today. Guys, why don't you answer with you or ask questions with your real names? So for this one, it's for smaller businesses, what software tools would y'all, and I'll actually pose it to the entire panel, would y'all recommend to start building data sets? We can start with you, JD.
I'll go. Start building a database. So there's many services. There are free services available. There are more accessible services with more advanced features, but build a database of subscribers, so that, because email produces a 40 times return on your investment. And then I'll hand over to Carola. After I've done my plug.
I would say, obviously, Arena decided to move across to Google Analytics 360, but there's still Google Analytics, which is free, and everybody can use that, and it's there and accessible. And you know, you need an analytics platform that helps you then make sense of some of that data. So that is there always and underpinning everything that you can do. And my guess is a lot of people who are listening in are probably already using it. I don't know if Riaan has any other suggestions or.
No, I mean, I think that kind of covers it. I mean, essentially, you want to do two things. You want to learn more about your users, which, as JD said, you can do in a very basic way. You can start doing that with some free tools, allowing people to register on your site to provide some basic information. And then it's about what happens on your site, which something like free Google Analytics can do quite beautifully.
Thank you for that, Riaan. I think you'll close us off because I have a question for you. Beyond data, what is the biggest challenge for publishers at the moment?
Look, I think right now, after the events of the past year, if you look at the publishing industry in this country, I mean, I think that the challenge is clear that we've had a massive boost on the digital side of our business. We've seen record numbers of traffic coming to our websites in the past year. We've seen an uptick in the rate of digital subscriptions. We've had more publishers implementing paywalls. All of those are good things for us. But I think the biggest problem is that we've had a severe effect. The lockdown and the pandemic have had a severe effect on print publishing. Distribution was severely disrupted. Circulation numbers are down. If anyone follows the ABC reports, you'll see that. And sometimes there are good reasons for that. You know, I mean, for us, for example, we suspended some distribution routes in the past year, temporarily at least, to save some money. So I mean, all of those things have knock-on effects. But South Africans were at home. They were not getting out. They're not buying their print products. And now we have to, the challenge for us is to, how do we make the most of this digital influx in our industry to start compensating better for what we might be losing on the print side?
Thank you. I think we have space for one more question. And this is from Kulofelo Obasi. And Carola, I'll pose this one to you. How far is South Africa with data measurements compared to international standards? And I ask this because of your global, expertise.
I think it is, I would say, emerging. There are obviously there's bigger markets in terms of their digital and data maturity, like the UK and the US, which are probably further ahead. You see, I read lots of stuff about what's going on with the New York Times. If you're going to follow somebody and see somebody who's doing it incredibly well, follow the New York Times. They are streets ahead. They're doing a lot around subscription acquisition. They have been working on that plan for a long time, and that's underpinning developing first-party data. They've got a massive newsletter program. They've got everything. So if you want to look at somebody who's doing it in every single possible way you possibly could, look at the New York Times. They are amazing, absolutely streets ahead. But lots of people aren't there. A huge amount of people aren't there, and there's different levels. And I think it depends on the size of the publisher as well. It very much depends on what you've got available to you. You can have a big publisher in a smaller market that might still not have the ability to do some of these things. Either there's a budget issue, there's a resourcing issue, there's people. So it's South Africa's doing incredibly well. I think there is more that can be doing. There's definitely further steps to be taken, but it doesn't mean that you're way behind everybody else, because you're certainly not.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And thank you to all our panelists. Unfortunately, those are all the questions that we can take for now. I think I might have to pose to the IAB that we have a after show to the Insight series, just so we can cover everything. So thank you so much to all our speakers, and even from everyone who actually is joining us from home, from the office, from your bathtub, from your car. Thank you. And we hope you have a beautiful end to your week. I want to thank our event partners, Gumtree, Everlytic, and Biz Community. And we will catch you all on our next episode in April, where we will look at the ever complex and valuable world of unlocking data for use in digital marketing in alignment with the key principles of transparency, trust, choice, and control. That's it from all of us. Thank you.